Hello and welcome to another episode of Golden Nuggets with Silvia Aldawi. Today I'm joined on the couch with Caroline Tinkle of Bayut. She's a director of training over there. Do you want to just introduce yourself, Caroline?
Yeah, my name's Caroline. I've been in Dubai since 2012. I've been at Bayut since 2016, came from Texas, and oversee a training academy for real estate agents at Bayut, which is...
The Bayut Academy.
The Bayut Academy at Bayut, absolutely.
So what goes on at the academy? What kind of modules or classes are you offering?
So we have everything starting for basics for brand new agents, foundations of real estate, up to negotiation, how to talk with investors, help I'm new to sales. We've got communication. We've got about 15 different modules designed to help agents really understand how to be competitive in the real estate market. It's a industry that I see a lot of times people get hired for, and there's no effective training for real estate agents, which is the whole reason why we're chatting today, I believe.
And yours are in-person classes rather than online or virtual?
All in person, 2-hour sessions. We do them Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we've got about 15 modules.
Okay. And what's your opinion on online versus in person and the effectiveness? Because you're you have a training background.
Yeah, I have got a background in training. I think it really depends on who the end user is. So, and it depends perhaps where the end users are. I find we're currently in Dubai. I find in Dubai, in-house training is so much more effective. It's a lot easier to stay focused and not use training as a podcast if you're in a training room. I think a lot of times when it's online, it's something that's done in the background while you're doing other tasks at the same time. But it's really dependent on the person. I do online training myself, and I find it really effective for me. So I think it depends how intrinsically motivated the person is and what it is that they're trying to get out of the training. It's a real difference between someone's been told by their company, you need to go to this training,
and
versus
they want to go.
I want to go to this training and learn something.
And I mean, it's always like fully booked. Your classes are always fully booked.
Absolutely.
What are the most popular classes or modules that you're getting requests for?
So the most popular ones we do, Help I'm New to Sales, Introduction to Communication Preferences, our Negotiation for Real Estate Agents, and then we have one that's called COCROE Talking with Investors, and that's the most popular one.
COCRO.
Yeah,
Okay.
cash on cash, return on investment, return on equity, all the terms that agents really need to understand when working with investors. I just gave it a really complicated name.
Okay, well, tell us about that. So you've got there's a lot of kind of metrics and language, words used for in the investment world, which you don't need to have a degree to understand it, but every real estate agent should know these metrics.
You don't need to have a degree to understand it, but you do need to understand how to talk the language that an investor is speaking. So I put this session together because I was getting really frustrated hearing people throw rental yield around as if it was a really good metric to use. And it's a great metric for understanding perhaps how a city's performing. But if you're just telling me, here's the price of a rental over what it costs, that's not really giving me much insight into how that property's going to cash flow, especially if you're working with an investor that's maybe looking to invest from overseas. I need to understand what my expenses are.
Service charges.
There's a lot more than service charge. Is there going to be a property management? How much is my maintenance going to be? If I'm renting it as a long-term rental, I have to account for all the pillowcases that go missing, all the dishes that get broken.
Wear and tear.
Wear and tear on a property. And then there's different metrics that a mortgage buyer is going to use versus a cash buyer. So if we're looking at rental yield, great if you're assuming that everyone's a cash buyer and doesn't have mortgage costs. But a true investor is probably going to want to do a little bit more of a deep dive. And so we look at what those metrics are. And then ultimately, how can you look at return on equity for understanding, is it time to perhaps upgrade into another property? Is it time to sell it and look at what else I can invest in?
An advisory role, because that's ultimately what the role of a real estate
An
agent
advisory
is.
role, and really speaking the language that that an investor's
would
speaking.
Yeah.
So I think if an investor calls up and asks what's cash on cash return, if a real estate agent pauses and says, I'm not really certain what that is, that could potentially be throwing away a lead. Whereas if you're prepared to be able to answer those questions, if you know cap rate and when to use it, you're just a lot more prepared.
Absolutely. And so what would you say is the kind of current state of real estate training, and what would you like to see being done differently?
So are we talking the industry around the world? Are we speaking specifically where we are right now at the moment?
We could go regional, we can go global.
Because globally, it's really going to depend on the market. So I think if we're looking regionally and we're in a little bit of a younger market as far as real estate, there's not a lot of training that goes on. There's a handful of companies that have in-house training, but I think a lot of the in-house training is more onboarding. It's a lot of induction. And it's not necessarily always done by people that understand how adults learn. Putting your best salesperson in front of people and saying, this is how I do it, can be really inspiring, but it's not really teaching. It can be intimidating, and it's not really teaching someone to think on their feet and what to do if they're given a situation that's a little bit different than what's explained. So I think that what anyone new to sales, regardless of the industry, needs is really the skill set to how can I apply best practices in any situation that's thrown my way and be able to effectively answer questions, concerns, objections. Those are three different things that have three different responses.
And what do you find are the common mistakes agents make in real estate? Top three.
So I think the top three is forgetting to do their job, and it's when the initial phone call sounds something like this. Can I get the reference number? Is it cash mortgage?
I hate that.
When are you looking to move?
Because, okay, let's talk about that reference number. When I'm calling, I'm calling because I've seen the listing and I'm there and I've called your number. I want to talk about the property. I'm not looking for the reference number. That's not my language. That's not my... So the beginning of the conversation already starts on the back end because you're like
I may not even know that there's a reference number there. And at this point, all I'm doing is saying, hey, I'm interested in a property that looks similar to something that I'm seeing that you have online. So I think a much better question than reference number is, tell me what exactly are you looking for? Cash mortgage, not appropriate to ask on the first phone call. Certainly not appropriate to ask when you don't know someone's name and you're missing the entire selling process.
But why do they ask that question? What relevance does it have to the beginning of the relationship?
It has no relevance to the beginning of the relationship.
So it's just a bad habit.
It's a bad habit. And quite frankly, if someone asked me that question, I would go on to another agent. I would find it really aggressive. If you walked into the Honda dealership and they said, welcome to Honda, are you going to pay cash or are you going to take out a loan? You would just be like, whoa, I'm just here looking at cars. Like, yeah. So I think that assuming that the person's ready to sign on the dot.
I mean, that, like the first one that you mentioned, what I've noticed as well is, I'll see the listing, I'll see the agent's profile online. I'll call the number expecting to speak to that agent. But for reasons, for operational reasons, agencies have the calls diverted to reception. Yeah. So you end up speaking to a receptionist who's just going to process your inquiry.
And that I think as well can be very frustrating. And I think there's a much better way that can be done. So right now, what we hear a lot of is, can I get the reference number? Can I get your phone number? Can I get your email? The agents out there call you back. And if you're someone that's looking for help, you walk away from that feeling like, well, now I'm part of a database, but I have no actual information.
And you've moved on as well. Like, you're not, when they do eventually call you back, you can't remember what property you were inquiring about.
I have no idea what property I called about, and I'm just going down the list of other agents. I think if leads are being directed to a centralized number, I think training the admin staff to say something along the lines of, this is a fantastic 3-bedroom property. It's still available. The listing agent on this, Silvia, is currently out of the office. I need to get just a few pieces of information from you. Can I get your name, phone number? I'll send this on to the listing agent. However, here are their details. It might be a little bit easier for you to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. So that would make the experience for me, or the customer journey, so much better than just being asked reference number. We'll send you a WhatsApp.
What's your phone number? What's your email? So we're going to throw you to a database where then perhaps an agent's going to call and ask the exact same questions all over again.
But you hit the nail on the head, because it isn't just about training real estate agents. It is about training everyone in the entire industry. Everyone has a role to play.
It's the whole process, and I don't want to be in a database. So if I'm calling a centralized number, I want someone who is in the call center, an admin, to be able to ask me some questions. What exactly are you looking for? Help me understand what's brought you to the decision to buy property today or to sell property. The more questions they ask up front, which are just help me understand what you're trying to accomplish, will help that person direct my inquiry to the right person. Instead, I'm probably going to get a phone call that's, hi, this is Caroline. I'm calling from XYZ Real Estate. So tell me, what property were you calling about? And
you have to repeat yourself.
I'm going to have to repeat myself, and I have no idea what property I was calling about, because I've probably called 50 agents about 20 different properties.
And then there's very little follow through. So I have, I'm moving. I've gone through this experience recently. I'm still going through this experience. I will register. I believe I'm in the database, and I may have done a viewing, viewed the property, but no one's called me since. No one's called me since. Not that agent, not their colleagues. So if you're doing the most to get my contact details, contact me.
I think, and I think a lot of sales directors at probably every agency would agree with this. It's really important that you use the CRM, that you enter the information, and that you enter follow-up. I tried to call Silvia. She didn't pick up the phone. I'm going to put a note in to try to call her later in the day. I'm going to put a note in to follow up with WhatsApp, with an email, until I'm actually able to make contact. I think a lot of leads fall through the cracks.
The wayside,
and then they get sent to a new agent, and there's no history or background, and then you're starting the process all over again.
And I'd say how this region differs from the UK and possibly the US. In the UK, you'd be added to some kind of automated mailing list where you get an email of every new listing that comes on. So at least I feel like I'm part of that database, and I'm getting to learn about the hot properties, once they hit the market. In the US, it's slightly different because you have MLS. So an agent's role could be considered easier because they have access to everything.
Yeah.
Tell us how MLS works.
In the US, they're operating as a true broker. So I've got access to the multiple listing service. It's a database of all public listings, and by far the majority of listings are in the MLS. There's always some exclusive listings. We would call them pocket listings here that aren't there, but let's say the majority of listings are there. So an agent really does work as a broker. So I contact you. I say, I'm looking for a ranch style house with 3 bedrooms, 4 baths in Austin, Texas. You're able to pull from the ML list every house that fits the profile of what I'm looking at, arrange a viewing. You're guaranteed to get your part of the commission because you're operating as a true buyer's agent, the seller's agent's operating as the seller's agent. So it's
and that's quite common. Like they call it double ending if you're a buyer and a seller's agent.
Yeah, sometimes if you're the seller's agent, because you're advertising the property on your end, you're going to bring the buyer in. But there's always a little bit of an issue there. Who are you representing? Because as a seller's agent, you're representing the best interest of the seller. If you're a buyer's agent, you're representing the best interest of the buyer, and those are two opposed interests.
Yes, yeah.
And your interest is not what's going to net you the most commission, but what's going to make your client happy.
Yeah, and there is that conflict of interest here because agents are double ending. You know, they're representing the seller and they're representing the buyer. So you have to ask, who are you really working for? If they get commission from both, fantastic, but mostly it's the buyers that they're getting commission from. So they should be working in the buyer's interest. The problem is they're only trying to push or sell the listings that they have access to.
Yeah, and I think that's really frustrating for agents and for the end user. In an ideal situation, you'd be able to reach out to every other agent in the area and say, I've got a qualified buyer, I'd like to set up a viewing of this property. And agents that have been in the market for a long time that have a good reputation are able to do that. It can be really difficult for a brand new agent to do that. And it makes it even more difficult when a brand new agent maybe isn't as confident on the phone, reaching out and asking another agent to work with them.
Well, actually, it's interesting because aside from that awful question of what's the reference number, sometimes the second or third question is it for you or are you an agent?
Yeah.
And hate it. Again, it's something that, okay, you can find out. I can imagine it's going to be super annoying to turn up to the viewing only to find out that this is, you know, the buyer's coming with their own agent. I don't condone that. I don't condone non-disclosure that you're an agent and you're working on behalf of your buyer. But it shouldn't be that if I am a buyer or a tenant, I don't want to hear this question.
That question should never be asked. So I think a really good agent, and one of the things that I talk about in Bayut Academy is when you show a property to a client, I would always say, hey, Silvia, do me a favor. If you look at Bayut this evening and you see other listings, would you allow me to contact the agent on your behalf? So treat the client as if you are their exclusive agent. And then when you contact the other agent, you identify yourself right away. My name's Caroline. I'm calling from XYZ agency. I'm working with a buyer who's qualified. They're interested in this property. Happy to send an agent to agent agreement. When can we set up a viewing?
And not only that, I mean, they're in WhatsApp groups with fellow agents. There's products out there like Broker Connector where you can just put out your qualified buyer or tenant, but tell the buyer or the tenant that you have access to that so that they don't just contact everybody after they contact you know?
My job is to deal with all the other agents so that you don't have to. So I'm a big proponent of saying things like, I really pride myself on my service. If you've appreciated my service, I'd really appreciate your business. As you know, I am commission-based. Remind people that you are commission-based and remind people that you are providing a service. But it's also really important that you're an area specialist and that you know all the other agents in the area. Yeah. And you really have to know the other agents in the area to reach out to them, to be able to work with them.
So it's not just about your personal brand in connection with the buyer or the tenant, but it's also your personal brand amongst other agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with every conversation you have, whether it's with an end user or if it's with another agent, is what is that last conversation that I had with this person saying about my personal brand? Yeah. Am I the type of person that this other agent wants to work with or this client wants to work with? Or am I the type of agent that causes a client to literally throw a lead away and find another agent to work with because they're looking for a personal brand that's more in tune with what they value? I think you asked me what are some of the mistakes that I see with agents. I think a lot of it is just very aggressive, which comes back to this cash mortgage. When are you looking to move? You know, people are paying a lot of money for property. If it's an 800,000 dirham property, that's a lot of money. If it's a 12 million dirham property, it's a lot of money. So tell me, what are you looking for? How can I help? What are you looking for in an agent? Ask these open questions. It helps you build trust. It helps you build connection, relationship. And we know people buy from people they trust, and they trust people they like, and they like people they connect with. So you have to go through all those steps.
The future state of training in real estate?
The future state of training in real estate.
What would you like to see more of?
I think I would like to see more people understand that everyone needs training. If you're an experienced agent, there's a lot that you can learn from coming in and training. And maybe it's just a refresher that you could say things differently. Maybe it's just getting yourself in the right space. So I think a lot of agents think they don't need any training, especially depending on what the market is in one's home country, right? So right now in the UAE and Dubai, the market's really great. So I don't need to do any training because I'm making money, but markets change very quickly.
Yeah. And it's about being able to weather the storm when it's not great, as well as when it's great. Anyone can sell in a great market.
In a great market, absolutely. And I think for more agencies to really commit resources to training, so it's not just appointing your best salesperson as the in-house trainer, but really understanding principles of adult learning, giving people the skill set to think on their feet, to be critical thinkers, to be able to deal with any type of objection that might come their way.
Because just being a good agent doesn't necessarily make you a good trainer, right?
No, no. They're two completely different skill sets.
Disciplines, yeah.
In fact, you can be a very good trainer and not have been a really great agent, and vice versa. And then I think another issue that I see with agents is a tendency to argue. So if you get an objection, instead of just sitting back and acknowledging that I've heard your objection, just arguing back why you need to buy the property right now.
Okay, well, let's talk about objections, because it is something that does require some kind of learning rather than on-the-job learn. Even on the job, you can't learn it because you get the objection. You don't really know what to say apart from being defensive. So how do you train agents to handle objections?
So there's a couple of things that we do. One is, and this is objection handling 101.
Rule number 101.
101, right? It's a framework called APAC that stands for acknowledge, probe, address, isolate, and close. And the first step is simply, I understand how you feel. The second is, so tell me what's got you feeling this way. But before you can even do that, I think you do need to sit back and understand what are the common objections that you hear over and over again. So one of the things that you might hear with a phone lead that you haven't spent a lot of time with, maybe I showed you one property and I say, so Silvia, the price is right, the location's exactly where you were looking, do you want to submit a contract? And you might say, you know what, we're going to wait. And a lot of agents might go in for the kill. But if you wait, it's not going to be there anymore. I've got 5 other buyers. You need to put a contract right now. And it's just really aggressive. And you haven't even acknowledged what it is that the client said. So what you could do instead is, I get it. A lot of people get a little bit nervous at this stage. So tell me, what exactly are you waiting for? Or what's got you concerned? But I think if you look at the top objections that you get over and over, and getting used to going through a framework can be really beneficial. The acknowledging, I mean, if you can't think of anything to say, it can be as simple as, I get it. And you can always just ask, what's got you concerned? What's on your mind?
Because, you know, there's some things that you can, that when you're handling objections, you're trying to get into their way of thinking, but also some of them have a solution. Some objections have a solution. Some of them have no solution, okay? So you need to discover, okay, is it an objection to the location? If it's an outright no, I want to know so that I can make the next property fit that criteria. But if it's a maybe, then that's when my job kicks in to actually explain, well, I've done the drive from here to A to B, and it actually takes 15 minutes or whatever it may be. Or did you know XYZ is you know, located just around the corner? So it's, I wouldn't say that handling objections is about convincing, because like you said, then it just turns into an argument.
And you can never argue a client into believing that you're right.
And you just want to kind of, it's a service, it's a third party kind of objection. You don't take it personally. You know, if someone says this is not my style, you don't then say, why? It's modern. No, now we're arguing tastes, you know, and you're not going to be able to enforce your taste on me. If I can't see myself living here, I can't see myself. Yeah. Let's get out. Let's leave.
Tell me, what about this do you like? And what about this don't you like? So that I can have a better understanding of what to show you the next time. But you're exactly right.
And I think there is a tendency to project your own taste or opinion on a property as an agent. So this is something that I'm quite passionate about undoing, is when you go into a property, don't say, oh, look, you've got a lovely kitchen over here, or, you know, oh, look how beautiful the view is. Maybe it's a horrible view and I don't agree with you. But now, because you've told me your opinion, I'm not going to offend you by saying, actually, it's a disgusting view. So it already kind of puts us at a distance, because your opinion is different to mine. So find out what my opinion is.
Yeah, and I think that you can simply just say, so tell me, how are you feeling? That's a nice open question that allows the client to tell you exactly how they feel about a property that you've shown them.
Or you could even say, what do we think? You know, it's like the we, because I'm on your side. So what do we think about this? Could this work? You know, it's about, I'm on your side, not on the person who gave me this listing side. So that's A, acknowledge. P
is probe. So this is a classic example that I use when I do a session in objection handling. So it's a really easy objection to overcome, but maybe as an agent you say, so the price is right, the location's right, the house has the remodeled kitchen that you were looking for. Why don't we go ahead and submit a contract? And the client says, you know what? I don't really like the property. It's painted bright yellow. So the whole process would sound something like, I get it. The house is painted bright yellow. So tell me, what would your ideal property look like? Well, I would love it if it was painted cream. And then you go in with a solution and say, if we were to put in the contract that the seller paints it cream before handing it over, is there anything else that would prevent you from moving forward? No, I didn't even know that we could do that. Absolutely we can. So why don't we go ahead and submit the contract? Now that's closing. It's a really easy solution, and I've made it easy, but it walks you through. So, you know what? We're going to wait. So tell me, what are you waiting for? Or
does someone else need to view it before you make the final decision? Do you need to speak to someone? Why?
And a lot of times they're not really objections. It's just someone putting up their hand saying, I don't know that I trust you enough to want to go through this process with you. A really common reflex objection that you get in real estate is, you know what, we're just looking right now. I get it. A lot of people are, as it's a great time to buy. Out of curiosity, what made you call about this property? If you can get them to tell you your story, maybe you find out they lived in that neighborhood 3 years ago and really regret not buying property. But if you argue back with them, that's probably not going to get you the solution. And what a lot of inexperienced agents want to say is, well, okay, call me when you're a little bit more serious. And they're not going to call you back.
Yeah. And they would be considered a time waster, which is a shame because, okay, they may be wasting your time right now, but it's not a waste of time because in 3 months, this person might be ready to transact.
Yeah.
But
and
because you haven't given them that.
Yeah, and there's so many things you could ask. So if someone's saying, you know what, we're just looking right now, well, then I'm glad you called. So out of curiosity, has anyone walked you through the entire purchase process? If they say no, they probably are just looking. Well, then let me get you some information about the purchase process. If they say absolutely, and I've already qualified for my final approval, then you know they're really qualified and you don't want to let them go. So,
okay. How does an agent stand out in the current market with the current tools that are at their disposal?
I think the best way for an agent to stand out is by stop doing the same thing that every other agent is doing.
What's every agent doing?
Yeah, so there's one unique thing about every person, and that's that person, their personality. So I think really be yourself, but beyond that, understand what your personal brand is, and not your personal brand in a buzzword, but what is it that you really bring to the table? What's your mission statement? What's your vision statement? What's your values? I ask agents this a lot in Bayut Academy. Out of every career in the world, why did you choose real estate? And the vast majority of agents will say money.
Money, yeah.
And of course, everyone does their career for money. But the answer that I love is when someone says, I chose real estate because I genuinely enjoy meeting people and helping them. Yeah. So, you know, think about what it is that you enjoy about meeting other people. What do you enjoy helping other people accomplish? Really define what your values are. And think about who you are. You know, in Dubai, you could be the real estate agent that sells properties to the scuba dive community. You really could differentiate yourself and brand yourself that way. But there's a lot of agents doing the same thing as every other agent.
Just copy paste.
Yeah.
And what's your when you're scrolling through social media, what's your opinion on the current projection of brands on social media?
I'll give this in our region. I'll give a lot of agents really put themselves on the line and get in front of a camera, which is not always comfortable. No. So I give a tremendous amount of credit for going out and doing that. But if all you're doing is walking through a nondescript property and showing me, this is the kitchen, this is the powder room, you're not giving me a lot of information. You could use, we've got on Bayut, we've got Dubai Transactions, which is powered by the land department that's got all the last sold transaction data. You could say, today we're looking at a property, I don't know, in the greens, and down here, you know, how people could do this on their social media, and you could show, here are the last 3 sold properties that are just like this. Now you're giving something of value to the client. So the client's not following you on social media to get a lot of housing tours. They want you to teach them something. I think there's a lot of missed opportunity for educating end users.
Because I think like one of the biggest maybe unknowns for a first-time buyer is, because you keep hearing it, no Dubai property tax, no property tax, but then you've got a whopping transfer fee, which not actually many people are aware of until they come to purchase, and they see it, you know, the purchase price, you've got the transfer fee, the commission, it gets a bit kind of, so no one's talking about that.
So first question, instead of, can I get reference number, is this cash mortgage? Maybe it could sound something like, do you mind me asking, what's your name? Silvia. Has anyone walked you through the entire purchase process? Because there are a lot of fees. That would be question number 1. And then I think as well, where I come from, the seller pays commission. So it's really unusual for a buyer to pay commission. If I went to the mall and I bought a handbag at just any random store, let's say the handbag was 2,000 dirham, when it came time to pay for it, if they said, well, it's going to be 2,600 dirham because that's my commission, you would just be like, that's so weird. So Dubai real estate, I think, feels that way for a lot of buyers because they're not used to all the fees. It usually comes from the sellers. But just to educate your buyer that, yes, you're paying the fees when you purchase the property, but the upside to that is when it comes time to sell the property, you're keeping all of the money as opposed to handing over the 4, 5, 6% that you normally would in another market. Those costs are you're going to pay them at some point. It's just, are you paying it as the buyer or the seller?
True. Okay. Cold calling, another dirty word in real estate.
Yeah, it's
full of dirty words.
It's ridiculous.
What would your definition, what is cold calling? Because I think it's got to a stage where people are so terrified of being fined for cold calling that they're just not actually calling anyone, even customers that, you know, could be considered a warm lead that they've dealt with before. So I've
heard this in Bayut Academy. We can't call any clients at all, can we? So cold calling is when I go, hi, Silvia, my name's Caroline. Do you want to buy property?
Or sell.
Or sell property. Or even worse, when I pretend that we've met. Hi, Silvia, it's Caroline.
Hey,
how are you? Yeah, don't you remember? We met a couple of weeks ago with that networking event over at the souk. That's cold calling. And I think it's pretty ridiculous to think that you're just randomly going to get a seller to have you represent their property by calling out of the blue.
I mean, I think some people do have success. I mean, the success rate is, I think, 2%. So you've got to call 200 people to get one possible.
Yeah, and if you get that one possible listing, are you getting it as an exclusive listing, or are you one of multiple agents? Now there's a cap on 3, but a listing's not very valuable if I only have a 33% chance of selling it.
Yeah.
And I do think that people that are willing to just hand their listing over to a stranger are not giving exclusivity.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you define as a warm call, or what is appropriate? What's an alternative to cold calling?
So anyone that has expressed interest in learning about your services. So I filled out a form on your website because I wanted to get more information about selling my property. Or I did some social media posts that said, I'm a spring specialist. The last 4 M units in Springs 2 sold for this price. Comment below to get information on what your property might be worth. That's a great example of, that's not even really a warm lead. That would probably be more of a hot lead if someone reached out. But someone's got to express an interest. I've heard from agents that, well, I have a friend that's a reservations manager at an upscale restaurant in Dubai. So he's given me all the phone numbers of people that have made reservations to this expensive restaurant. Rich people eat there, so I'm going to call them and ask if they want to buy property. And that's ludicrous and it's not ethical. But someone that has said, please contact me because I would like to learn more information about selling my property, that's absolutely a great lead.
But there is an opportunity for that kind of friendship or network that you have with a reservations manager. So rather than doing something underhand and saying, sell me or give it away to me for free, the database of your exclusive diners, it could be look, let's cut a deal. I'll send people to your restaurant, or I'll recommend your restaurant. And if any of your clients or any of your diners happen to be talking to you about real estate or whatever, then just pass my contact over to them.
Absolutely. Or maybe even better than that, network and spend time hanging out at these restaurants.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think a great source of business is hanging out at the cafes, restaurants around the golf course communities in Dubai. The people that live there hang out there. The people that would like to live there also hang out. So instead of relying on someone to pass the information to you, just get in front of those potential clients.
And there is that kind of, when you introduce yourself as a real estate agent to a non-real estate agent, there is that kind of like, oh God, here we go. They're going to try and sell to me, or they're going to. So, and I've checked the kind of population numbers versus number of agents, and 1 in every 200 of the adult population in Dubai is a real estate agent.
Wow.
So if you have to also make 200 phone calls to find a buyer or seller, it's just an impossible circle. But that's where most people start. And again, I would argue or agree with you that it is about networking, being out there, being on the golf course, working with your connections to be the person or top of mind when someone else mentions a need for a real estate agent.
Yeah, it's all the things that I think people know. Having a social media strategy to stay top of mind, networking, getting in front of people, but also thinking about what is your personal brand and what kind of conversations are you having when you meet people.
What are the common questions you're being asked? Is it something that you could create a social media post about, whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, or LinkedIn? LinkedIn, I think it is quite underutilized.
I know a lot of agents that get really good leads from LinkedIn, especially when they are using LinkedIn to educate people about what's the reality of the real estate market. Look, I'm going to go to Bayut if I want to look at property for sale. So just posting property for sale, property for sale, property for sale is not interesting. But maybe educating me as a first-time home buyer in Dubai, how as an expat I can buy property and it's a lot easier than maybe I thought, would be helpful. I think there's a really missed opportunity when it comes to off-plan property. So the whole reason why the mortgage industry exists is because most people can't pay property in cash. So when off-plan's being advertised as really great payment terms, you've got 4 years to pay off this 6 million dirham property. That doesn't sound like a great payment term to me because I don't have 6 million dirhams sitting in the bank. But if you explain that upon handover, there's an opportunity to mortgage the balance, now you're educating me that I can tap into off-plan properties. And I guarantee you there's a lot of people that don't know that you can do that. There's a lot of expats that don't know the first thing about buying property.
So, I mean, at the moment, there's two camps. You're either an off-plan agent or a secondary agent. Do you think, or have you identified any skills, differentiators between the two camps? Like, is there something that you need to know if you're an off-plan agent or do differently versus a secondary?
I think the skill set's going to be the same. So it's going to be asking questions, listening to the client, tapping into brain chemistry of trust, all that great stuff. But with off-plan, you are selling something that's not been completed, and it is having a more in-depth conversation along the lines of what you would say to an investor, because you're having to have the conversation about put your money in this, that you're not going to get anything from it from 3, 4, 5 years, as opposed to other things that you could use the money for. Opportunity cost, right, is what we're talking about. But I know that you've done real estate in your past. So what would you say is the real difference in skills from selling secondary to off-plan?
So I would say secondary, you're going to need to know how to do a viewing, because that's one thing that isn't taught. And when I was a manager, actually one of the first things I do when I had a new agent was take them out to an empty property and show them how to do a viewing, because there is a skill to it. There is a good way and a bad way of doing it. You do have to give the viewer a bit of freedom and space, and the way you position yourself, the room that you start in, all of this needs to be taught, or you'll just learn it through experience.
Yeah.
Like that, actually, it worked really well when I did the viewing this way. From now on, I'm going to do it this way. And actually, each property requires its own style of tour. You know, maybe you start in the kitchen, or maybe you start in, you know, at the swimming pool, whatever it may be. So there's a bit more viewing training that's, there's a lot of viewing training that's required. With off-plan, it's more visionary, kind of how do you sell the story? How can you describe or create that kind of desire around something that doesn't exist? And of course, yes, you get the architect's rendering, but we all know they never quite end up looking the same.
It's never quite as green as in the art. There are fewer people doing yoga and less greenery.
Right, yoga in August on the rooftop. And then the other thing that I would say is probably you've got to know the developer inside out, because there's a differentiate. Like if you're an off-plan agent, you have to know every single, even if you're not focused on that particular developer, you've got to know what they're offering, because that's your competition, you know. So what is Imar known for? What is this developer? And what does Miras do very well? You know, so differentiating the developers, knowing or being able to show examples of their ready units, and being able to tell stories about success, financial success from previous projects is key, I think. So these are the two main differentiators, I would say.
And I think with the off-plan, you maybe have a bit more opportunity to sell more inventory. So if I'm an off-plan specialist at agency X, I can really have an informative conversation with you about all the different options that are available
and unit
in
types
the market
and views and
whereas when it's secondary, I'm limited to what the inventory that's in stock at the moment is. So if I'm looking secondary townhouse in town square, there's not a lot of options available at the moment. Whereas with off plan, there is a lot that's coming up, and I have a lot more that I can sell, but I need to make sure that I'm matching the product to the end user.
And you've got to, as an off-plan agent as well, you have to be able to read and translate a floor plan like no other, you know. So that's something that could be lacking.
We see in Bayut Academy that people really struggle with reading floor plans. But I will say I as well also sometimes struggle with reading floor plans, because when they're so small, it is next to impossible. It's not reading the floor plan itself, but they sometimes can be really small and difficult. But you're exactly right.
And, you know, sometimes people don't know the difference between square meters and square, you know, some people square footage, some people are square meters. So as an off-plan agent, I definitely say know both and be able to convert them quickly, and actually ask people, do you work in square meters or square footage? What would you prefer me to talk?
Absolutely.
Which language do you want me to talk
And that's actually a pretty easy translation.
What is it, divide by 10?
65 square meters, 650 square feet.
But we just assume here, everyone talks in square footage, so I'll talk in, but where your buyer's coming from, they may be talking in square meters. So yeah. What would you say to anyone getting into real estate? What someone's kind of listening to this and thinking, you know, I see a lot of rich people in real estate. First, we can talk about that. I want to get into real estate. What is the number one skill they need to hone down before they even think about getting into the industry?
So you really have to be able to build connections with people. And I think, look, everyone gets into their career for a monetary aspect, but lead with really wanting to help people and less about, I want to get money in my pocket. If you truly want to help people and you really are, the money will come. I see a lot of people really struggle with effective phone skills, and your first conversation is almost always going to be awkward on the phone. And it's not, let me tell you everything about the property, but I'm glad that you called. Tell me, what are you looking for? So that's the first one, is getting the client to talk. And the second is understanding you're not really in sales, you're in service. And if you do the service piece correctly, the selling piece will come along. But I hear a lot of phone calls. Maybe you called me and I missed the call and I'm calling you back. Hi, Silvia, it's Caroline with XYZ Agency. I missed a call. You called about a property on the Palm. It's a wonderful 3-bedroom with 354 square feet, and it's got an upstairs kitchen and a swimming pool downstairs, and it's just so much information as opposed to, hello, Silvia, my name's Caroline. The reason why I'm calling is I missed a call from you about a property on the Palm. Tell me, what exactly are you looking for and how can I help?
Such a difference.
Such a difference. And when you allow the person to talk about themselves, it really sets off brain chemistry in the brain that makes them feel good about themselves, and it makes them feel good about you. It's really an important part of building trust.
Is that serotonin or?
That's oxytocin, actually. So if I'm talking at you, I'm not tapping into this really great hormone that helps build trust. But if I'm allowing you to talk to me about what it is that you're looking for, it is tapping into oxytocin. And I think with that as well is for a new agent to understand whether it's an investor, and I'll go to my grave on this one, whether it's an investor or an end user, real estate is highly emotional. I have a lot of people say, well, for investors, it's not. But even for an investor, it's still highly emotional. So understanding how emotional real estate is. When people are selling property, they're selling the best house in the whole wide world because it's their house and it's got the memories of their kids. And when they're buying a property, they're buying a place that's going to store all their memories.
Yeah.
So this reference number, cash mortgage, when are you looking to move? You're just bypassing that whole part.
Yeah. And people love talking about themselves, their problems, and you could watch a conversation between two people. It could be completely one-sided, and the person that did all the talking would come away saying, "I really like that person," even though they didn't know anything. They didn't ask anything or get to know the other person. The fact that they could speak about themselves, their problem.
They activated their brain. They're feeling great. The other person's feeling talked at.
Yeah. So there's a handful of agents, and I mean, there's 40,000 agents right now in Dubai. There were 11,000 transactions last month. So there's a handful of agents that are not transacting. We assume even, the 11,000 deals that were closed could have been done by, a percentage of them could have been done by several agents.
If you look at the 80-20 rule, there's probably 20% of the agents are generating 80% of the sales.
Absolutely, totally applies. So what would your advice be to that 80% that perhaps didn't close a deal in the last few months?
So it goes back to everything that we just said. Look at what the majority of these agents are doing, and it's all about building trust. It's building that relationship. It's not going in for the kill on the very first conversation. Those agents that conduct a lot of the transactions that take place every month, and I know who they are, and I see on their LinkedIn that they've closed 5, 6, 7 deals. They're getting a lot of referrals because they're taking time. They understand that everyone has the right to take time when it comes to buying property. And I hear this from sales directors as well, that, well, if we haven't shown the right property in 2 weeks, then the client's not serious. I'm sorry. I've bought multiple properties in my life. I have every right to spend 4 or 5 months if I want finding the right property. So it's
rather than be labeled with unrealistic, or they're a
tire kicker, they're a time waster. Well, you label them that way, and they're going to not be a time waster with an agent that treats them in a way that
you'll bump
that
into
they
them.
want to be treated.
You'll bump into them at the transfer office with another agent.
Yeah, so it's really, building trust, understanding where they are on the selling cycle, on the sales cycle. Maybe they're just getting information, and it's okay if they're not going to do anything for a year or two, but have a strategy of keeping in touch with them in a meaningful way, not just sending them random listings for sale. But
and I'd say that as well, you have access to all these documents. You've got you get given their passport, their birth date. Make a note of it. Make a note of their birthday and send them a message. I mean, don't say, whatever you do, don't say happy birthday. Do you have anything to sell or rent? But
you could, it's amazing what a 20 dirham Starbucks gift card on someone's birthday would do. And even if they're not going to buy property, they probably know someone that is looking to buy or sell property and could send a referral your way. So it's, that trust is everything. You're not... I say in Bayut Academy, a lot of times it sounds like real estate agents are taking orders for pizza. And I know I keep talking about reference number, cash mortgage, when are you looking to move? That to me sounds like, do you want
thin
the whole
crust,
wheat crust or the thin crust? Do you want it delivered or are you going to pick it up? No, tell me, what are you looking for? How can I help? It's nice to meet. You know what? I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee, maybe look online, look at a couple of options, understand what you like, don't like, especially for new agents. We talk about 14,000 agents in Dubai, 11,000 transactions. You do have time to go meet people face to face. If you're an area specialist, you should be in your area on a regular basis. You know what? Why don't you come meet me at the coffee shop in the middle of the Springs? I'd love to show you around, understand a little bit more about you.
Totally agree. Okay. Well, unless there's anything you want to add.
I don't think there's anything I want
You
to
want to
add.
get to your cocktail
No,
appointment.
my cocktail appointment's not going to be for a half hour. So is there
Okay.
anything else that you want to?
What about you? Do you have any questions? Anything you want to know in your Q&A? Okay, let's talk about, we've spoken about brand and what to do, how to behave, skills required. But what about personal appearance? I see kind of a lot of agents shifting away from that traditional kind of suit and tie look and going a little bit more casual. What's your take on that?
So I'm all for being casual as long as you're professional. I think one of the things that I saw a real emphasis on a few years ago was very formal suits. And that's great, but not if you're relying on the suit to build credibility. If you're credible, and I started my training career at Apple. So my big boss was Steve Jobs. And he always wore a turtleneck, Levi jeans, and trainers. And I think he could have sold a house to anyone because of his credibility. So I do sometimes think there's so much emphasis on appearance where I'm more interested in what credibility, what substance are you bringing to the table. Now, of course, there needs to be a professional appearance, but I think you can absolutely do your job and you can be a luxury specialist and
Even
not
in
be
trainers.
in a formal suit. But
Okay, that answers your question. Any other follow-up questions? Okay, wow. Well, I guess we have a lot of golden nuggets dropped today. Thank you very much, Caroline. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And I think this is going to be a really useful episode for agents that are, struggling, perhaps identifying what they need to work on, knowing that there is a solution, and also anyone that's thinking about getting into real estate. You've kind of set the path for them for consideration.
so other than that, thank you so much for having me here
My
today.
pleasure,
It was
my
a
pleasure.
real pleasure.
Thank you. Signing out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next episode.